Do you wear safety goggles, Simon, when you're mowing the lawn?
Yeah, and
No, you don't.
safety shoes.
Right.
Especially with a trimmer, you can take a toe off.
When you jump up, your head very quickly hits the lighting fixture and suddenly your voice has gone up a few octaves rather unexpectedly.
It's kind of Homer Simpson into a bush, isn't it? It's like, let's hope the guy who signs all of the checks doesn't notice.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the F1 show sponsored by Audi, where we're going to look back at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, perhaps the last ever at Imola. Remains to be seen. Contract runs out at the end of the year. And a weekend where Red Bull out McLaren, Max putting on a note perfect race with the move of the season at turn one and then controlled it from there to take victory in Red Bull's 400th race start. We'll talk McLaren's strategy. We'll talk Ferrari's weekend of two halves, Williams' regular point scoring consistency, and much, much more. And we'll do that with the help of our Theodore Kravitz. And it's a warm welcome after making his debut for 2025 in the box. Not his first time for Sky, but his first time in 2025. Big Harry Benjamin is here. Harry, how are you? How was it? And I particularly enjoyed, I have to say, the Little and Large show at the Sky Pad and also in the Sky Box and that photo you put on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm well, Simon. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a really good weekend. It was nice to be back in Imola. The commentary box is on the smaller side, that's for sure. There is a sort of constant kind of squat that you have to do, which has its pros and cons, mainly cons. But no, it was look, we got a great race. If it is indeed the last time we are going to be in Imola, well, I mean, what a way to go out. Who knows what the future holds? But it was a great weekend and really throws up some good things to talk about. But well, this week there's not long to wait until we all go off to Monaco.
No, we're back off tomorrow. Probably by the time this is just going out, we'll be hopping back on a plane. Ted, did you show Harry the ropes? Did you show him a good time in Imola? Is there a good time to be had in Imola?
Always a good time to be had, yes. Ciao, Simon. should we explain that, the Little and Large show? So Harry was paired with Anthony Davidson, all 5'5", or is he 5'6"
I think
of him?
6.
And Harry is, what are you, Harry? 6'2"?
I'm 6'5".
6'5".
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
6'5".
Not helped by the fact that one of the reasons that we're not going back to Imola so many times in the future, if at all, is that let's just say the facilities are kind of stuck in the 1980s, and the commentary box roof has a big fluorescent light above it. That's not a problem for Anthony Davidson, but is a problem for a 6'5" commentator plus a headset. Did you hit the headset on the light fitting?
Yeah, the problem is, and the same problem happened last year as well, is, you know, I like to stand where possible to commentate. It's better for you, better for the diaphragm. However, when you start to get excited, sometimes you may sort of jump up a little if there's something Max Verstappen going around the outside at turn one. And when you jump up, your head very quickly hits the lighting fixture and suddenly your voice has gone up a few octaves rather unexpectedly. So look, there's definitely things to work on for that commentary box if we ever do come back.
We tend to sit down on this pod, but if you want to stand up, although actually that room there looks as if you might have the same problem going on.
No, I do have the height, but I'm on a sort of bar stool, so I'm sort of high up anyway. So middle ground.
You can project
Never mind
from
bar
there.
stool. Looks like bars behind you. When are you getting out, Harry? Have you got time off for good behaviour?
It's called soundproofing. This is my proper little podcast studio cupboard that I've built. You're not impressed?
It does look like bars behind you, next to
Hold
the
on,
poster.
let me tell you, it's much more professional than my office in your spare room. He looks like he's properly set up for it there. Although so do you with those lovely scatter cushions behind you. Should we get into it? Should we get into the weekend? Can I get? We're starting. We're trying some different features here on the podcast. Winner, shocker, and moment of the weekend. We did this a couple of weeks ago in Miami. Harry, you've had a few minutes to think about it. I've just sprung that one on Ted, but he can no doubt drum up something in the next 30 seconds. But aside from the obvious, well, I mean, maybe you'll go for the obvious. Who was your winner? What was your shocker? And what was your moment of the weekend?
I think, honestly, my winner has to be, I am going to pick the obvious, it's Max Verstappen and Red Bull, without a doubt. My shocker is actually, I'm going to say Esteban Ocon in the Haas. Try and think a little bit outside the box on that one. I thought he in particular had a really rather woeful weekend, last pretty much in every single session bar the qualifying, and that was only because of those who crashed in the red flag scenario that occurred for his teammate. And my moment of the weekend, again, hard not to give it to Verstappen's move, but I'm gonna try and be more interesting and I'm going to go for Alex Albon battling it out in the top 5. That nice dice with Charles Leclerc until it ended up with him going through the gravel. But for a moment, it looked like Alex Albon could have challenged for a podium at times. And I thought overall his moment was the battle with Charles Leclerc and being up there in the top 5.
Yeah, that was incredible. What about you, Ted?
Well, you did spring it on me, Simon, but that's the way I like it. So I'm going to say, I mean, the easy response would be that they're all the same thing, which is the winner is the pass where Oscar wasn't expecting the pass on the apex, the middle of turn 1, Verstappen. The shocker was Oscar letting that happen, and the moment of the weekend was the moment of the weekend, in that it sort of decided the race, or did it? Would they have won anyway, Simon? Which we'll probably get into. But otherwise, otherwise I could elaborate on that if you want. Winner would probably be, I don't know, maybe the Ferrari strategy department after having, take a tea break while you're at it, gate in Miami. They got it absolutely right with Lewis Hamilton leading to a 4th position in the race. If only they could get into Q3, then their lives would be easier. The shocker would probably be Yuki Tsunoda binning it on the first lap of Q1. That is a shocker, and was a shocker. Red Bull Racing don't like to see their cars upside down rolling in a gravel trap. That's not to say that other teams do, but it's just not a thing that Red Bull Racing drivers do. And especially as if, the old upside down, you see the floor, not that maybe it's pulling up the daisies at the moment, but what was the last one? Moment of the legend, the phenomenon Ronaldo, mistaking me for literally anybody else that he's met before.
I did enjoy that. For what it's worth, from my sofa in between ping pong sessions with my my son, it was his birthday weekend, so he got a ping pong table. In fact, I've got a ping pong just there.
Hey,
nice.
Happy birthday, Harry! Harry, say happy birthday, Harry!
Happy birthday, Harry! Is your son called Harry, Simon?
He is called Harry. Yeah, he was named after you.
Top tier.
He was named after you. So yeah, the wee man had his trampolining party, and then we had a bit of that.
Just like Simon's daughter, Crofty.
Yeah, I can't keep away from it.
Can't stop.
I can't keep away from it. Alex Albon, he was my winner of the weekend, because that's 6 top 10s in the first 7, and they're like regularly racing Ferraris and Mercedes the last couple of weekends. And Jimmy V, whatever that pep talk he had with Jack Whitehall at the Miami Grand Prix and all those espressos or espresso martinis is clearly doing something for the London-born Thai driver. And moment of the weekend, Franz Hermann.
Debut.
Hermann. I didn't mind that. Yeah, 296 GT3 Nürburgring, smashing the record, and then a bit of a nod to it from F1 and the graphics. He's unbelievable, isn't he? I mean, he's just had a kid, and he buggers off to the Nürburgring and smashes the lap record on his weekend off. I wonder what Kelly's saying back at home.
It's one way to get out of doing the nappy changes, I suppose.
Too right. I mean, I'd never get away with that. But then again, I'm not Max Verstappen, and nobody else is here anyway. Okay. So on that move, Ted, I'll start with. Well, no, Harry, I'll start with you, because obviously you were talking about it. That's the move of the season, wasn't it? At turn 1 by Max Verstappen.
It's got to be. I've been trying to think about what's happened so far this season, but I think because we weren't expecting it either, that's what elevates it too. Because actually Verstappen didn't get the best of starts. At one point he was down to 3rd, and I was chatting to Ant after the race, and it wasn't, he was looking in the midfield and I was focusing on the front, as we do when we're calling the lap 1, and we didn't think Verstappen was in with a shot, because at one point George Russell was up into 2nd and looking down the inside, but then Oscar Piastri breaks too early, and that just gives all the invitation Max Verstappen needs. He doesn't need any more than that. He will brake later if he sees or sniffs that opportunity. And it was right there for the taking. And as a result, we heard Russell on the radio, quite frustrated. He was boxed in all of a sudden, couldn't do anything. And in a circuit where we've all been talking about it's the last year most likely, and it's because it's one of these old school tracks, the cars are too wide for it. We're struggling to get that wheel-to-wheel racing and the regular overtakes at tracks like this. That's what elevates this as the move of the season, and just reiterates how if you give even the smallest of inches to Max Verstappen, he will take it and run.
I like the way it was kind of after Miami. He was saying, "Okay, Oscar, you got me eventually in Miami. Everybody said how clever you were in Miami about making me outbrake myself, and all those ruddy brakes. I blamed those ruddy brakes. Whereas you basically wore me out and then overtook me. Sorry, Oscar." This is the way we race. This is the way I'm going to race you. I'm just going to go. And Oscar's now got a really interesting decision. Because based on Miami, Oscar was kind of happy to let, and Lando was happy to let Max go, or, well, we know what happened at this run, knowing that their race pace would sort them out. But if Red Bull's, advantage like that, all right, maybe not Monaco, but Spain perhaps, continues, they can't afford to let him just go like that, especially the way Oscar's race just completely unraveled after that, Simon. So what do McLaren do next?
Well, I mean, the thing with that, Jacques Villeneuve was saying that he thought that Oscar was caught sleeping and that maybe he had one eye on George Russell pressing him from behind. But if the shoe was on the other foot, that space, would it have been left by Max Verstappen? I mean, it was like, I don't know. I mean, for me, it was just a brilliant move. But by Oscar's own admission, he should have braked later.
I think also the nature of how you approach that first chicane as well. Pole is on the left-hand side, and it's slightly curved. It's not a main straight. It's a constant kind of slight turn of the steering wheel right, then back left towards Tamburello before you get there. So if Piastri holds that racing line as he did and then moves to defend, in a way, he kind of digs himself in because the track slightly comes in on yourself because naturally the racing line, it widens the entry to the corner and that allows you the quickest route in. And I think maybe that was what ultimately undid him. He should have, perhaps in hindsight, moved across further to the right-hand side to sweep in. But was his eye distracted on Russell behind, who'd had a good start, thinking Verstappen had fallen back slightly as he did? I don't know. And I also wonder, has Piastri, is he starting, I know we're early stages, is he just starting to keep one eye on this championship as well and thinking, I don't need to do anything too mad, too risky. There's gravel here. He's not going to chance it around the outside like Miami, like Saudi Arabia and places like that. But I wonder if there's an element there. Is this the first time we're actually seen Piastri, well, maybe falter slightly in that opening lap dicing? But on the other hand, what we have seen from Piastri in his development for this year is that he can learn from and bank knowledge in an instant and not make the same mistake again. And I think that will make him stronger going forward.
He was faultless by Max once he got into that clean air. I think the thing here was this was not Suzuka, whereby McLaren was the quickest car and he just did a great job defending on a track where the McLarens tried to chase him down, but unfortunately, fortunately for Max, his amazing racecraft was able to keep them behind. I think this one here was a case of, and it was a pains for Christian to say at the end, we're sort of surprised by McLaren's lack of performance. I want to pick on a couple of things, Ted, that I was reading about this morning. 2 technical directives issued by the FIA in the build-up to Imola. And again, it's about the mind games that Christian and Zach and those fighting for the championship are tending to play with each other. The first technical directive relating to the measurement of the skid block materials and the way that teams have found ways to pass the probe test that measure the depth of the plank post-race. That had been brought up, discussion between the FIA and the teams. Obviously, for those that might have found a way around it, they wouldn't have been able to run the car as low. And there was an inference potentially that might have been the case for McLaren, although McLaren have denied it. And the second technical directive is that the FIA made clear a host of design ideas relating to the use of water cooling of wheel assemblies and tyres and other systems would not be allowed. Now, this sort of dialogue between the teams and the FIA is quite often used as a way to kind of, I suppose, smoke out ideas that the FIA will then publish guidance on, and then it would be perhaps up to the teams or those that are accused of this to remove them for the next race. McLaren say there's nothing untoward, but it just kind of ramps up that war of words, doesn't it? And Christian and Zach and everything they're trying to do to compete for a championship to put the other off.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'd seen an effect of the skid block thing. The skid block thing happens quite a lot because everybody post the Ferrari disqualifications in China is finding a way to kind of get round what you can do with the skid blocks. I'm not saying that Ferrari are, but there's always elements that people are trying to find how you can pass the skid block test. Who was it? Hulkenberg also got done for skid block wear, didn't he, in Bahrain? So it is a live matter, and I think that's something amongst a lot of the teams. I saw a lot of people sort of measuring flaws and deflection bits as well, being ultimately worried about or concerned about that, especially with the new technical directive. Hadn't heard more about the moisture and the water in the wheel assemblies. Whenever you kind of talk to people about it, they say they just can't understand how it would happen because the temperatures are such that you can't really rely on there being water in there and cooling and stuff like that. It just seems like a clever double brake duct cooling system rather than any moisture or water in there. But yeah, I mean, I think McLaren did it to themselves in a way, really, with Lando's qualifying position and Oscar's strategy and taking the bait of the early stop and putting Oscar into traffic. And we heard those radio messages, what we need here is clear air and space to do our thing. And that neither of which Oscar had. So yes, McLaren were slower than Red Bull, but Red Bull were using more or less the same kind of aero package plus upgrades that they had in Suzuka. So it wasn't really a surprise to me that they were quick. When I first saw on Friday morning that rear wing, and I was like, oh, that's the Suzuka rear wing, the sort of low downforce compared to the others. I thought, okay, well, they're trying a Suzuka. It might work for them. And with the upgrades, it did. But yeah, I think we'll have to see what happens in Spain. Monaco's a bit of an outlier to see if McLaren have lost pace, Simon.
Yeah, just with regards to the design ideas, the FIA already examined McLaren's wheel assembly and their brake system several times. They've said it's all legal and it's clever. So that kind of double brake duct that you were pointing out in what does that do on the grid? This very clever idea. And again, we've seen it with the flexi wings. And that's always going to be forefront again when we get to Spain. Harry, with regards to the strategic calls, Andrea Stella was defensive of what they did, but I suppose that when Oscar was on 16 lap older hard tyres at the end there, the question mark again raised its head. Should they have swapped them earlier on? He said no, it would have played out if the delta had been so great that he would have got straight past Oscar anyway. But could they have done something different on strategy? Do you think they got caught napping a little bit?
Well, I think the main crux of the strategy was the responding to in the first stop with Piastri and trying to get that undercut and perhaps seeing those Charles Leclerc stopping earlier as well, wanting to respond, and that was ultimately what undid it, because even though there was a series of time where the tyres were degrading, if you hung on to them, then it cleared, the graining cleared, and you could keep going. So ultimately, I think that's what undid them in terms of strategy. It was Tamburello that lost them the race, because I think what we've actually seen here is Andrea Stella, I think, said we were trying different ways, trying to unlock different strategies as the race came forward. But ultimately, even if we start to analyse, should they have swapped position later on the race with Norris, obviously much quicker tyres, much fresher tyres, allowing him to go quicker. Even when Norris got through, which he did, brilliant move as well, two teammates close together, that gives Andrea Stella something to think about. But it wasn't as if Norris was suddenly reeling in Max Verstappen. It was the same earlier on in the race as well. Verstappen had this race under control. I think what's been established from this weekend is that when we go to tracks with a high speed corners, actually McLaren and Red Bull seem fairly evenly matched, particularly with Red Bull's upgrades that they brought this weekend, helping them and focusing specifically, you want to say Red Bull. Obviously, Max Verstappen is the only one doing that at the moment. But when we go to lower speed nature circuits, the advantage comes back to McLaren more. And what we've seen from the first 7 races, I think, is that we're going to get races where it's neck and neck, evenly matched, or McLaren are currently out and dominating like Miami, 30 plus seconds ahead of the rest of the field. That's ultimately what's going to keep them in and win this championship. And while Andrea Stella sits on the pit wall, plays the game perfectly, 2 number 1 drivers, doesn't want to make any unnecessary team orders because it is still so early in the season. I think they know that actually it will unfold for itself in the race. They've got 2 sensible drivers that won't do anything brash after learnings, hopefully from last year, where we saw, I think Monza, wasn't it, last year, and papaya rules being implemented. So I think that's what's playing out here, what we're seeing. And McLaren and Red Bull are closer than we think. It's not an outright walkover for McLaren right now, but there will be tracks where McLaren do dominate. And that is where Red Bull and Max Verstappen need to step up the game and hope that they can steal it away from Piastri or Norris.
Oh, yeah, on that evidence, you'd think Monaco might be very much a McLaren track, wouldn't you, Ted?
Gosh, well, I don't know what's going to happen with this 2-stop shenanigans. Could it end up being Franco Colapinto winning after pitting on the first 2 laps and then consecutive laps and then just going up to the rear and then taking the lead while everybody else pits in front of him. Don't know how this is going to work. But Simon, you're a numbers man. You love nothing more than reading a standings, a championship standings at the end of the race. And what is it? 9 points, Lando to Max now. Lando's ahead of Max.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I make it 22, only 22 behind Oscar, the championship leader. And then still to come in Spain with perhaps the technical reset and everything that we're talking about. So, wow. I mean, did the Verstappens think they were out of the championship? After Miami, were they saying, we're never going to win a championship like this? Max did say, if my memory doesn't fail me, well, we're kind of out of this championship now. And they're really not at all, are they?
I genuinely think we'll get like a 2012 campaign almost, where Fernando Alonso, who didn't have the fastest car, single-handedly kept himself in championship contention till Brazil, right at the end. Even though Red Bull and Vettel were the quicker package, it was Alonso and Ferrari who were, I think, at times the 4th quickest car that year, were still keeping themselves in the hunt. I think that's what we could see with Verstappen. Although that Red Bull is not the 4th quickest car, at times it will be Verstappen who keeps himself in the hunt. This championship is not over. Verstappen will not ever, surely, openly actually believe that he's out of the championship fight.
No, 148 points, is that right? Separating McLaren from Red Bull in 3rd place in the Constructors. I think you could legitimately say that they're out of the Constructors on the evidence of, we must just pick this up. I know it was a great recovery drive from Yuki Tsunoda, but that is still a problem. That second Red Bull is still a problem, and it's going to cost them a Constructors' Championship this year. I think we could say that frankly now, couldn't we, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, they'll come back and they'll say, well, we were never going to win the Constructors again, but this year anyway, because McLaren was so strong but yeah, no, I mean, they're not, I mean, Mercedes, they'll do well to fight. What is it? 131 Red Bull, 147 Mercedes. So yeah, they might finish second if they're lucky, but I don't know. I think all of that will be, if they can just take the drivers to the last few races, the Vegas, the Qatars, the Abu Dhabis of the year, then no one will be talking about the Constructors, and they won't either. And let's talk after Spain. Let's see where we are with some of the more TDs, and then if they were to get a drivers with all of this, then they'd be thinking, so what about the Constructors?
It would be Max's finest championship. If he could make it 5 in a row against this McLaren with the early. We talked about it on another podcast, Harry. It might be an inverse of last year, where Red Bull started strong, McLaren turned it round and came strong through the back end of the season to win it. Who knows? But Spain will be key. And actually, these 3 races, this triple header to start Europe, so key.
Massively. It is relentless, not only for the stiffening of the flexi wins in Spain, Ferrari might well be clinging on to that as well to see if they can try and turn their fortunes around a bit too. But I think you cannot. This season, at the start of this year, I think we were saying, or I certainly was, probably maybe building it up, trying to, that this could be one of the all-time classics. Last year of the regulations, before we changed things up, the field tighter than ever. And maybe if you step back on the face of it after the first, 4 or 5 races, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a bit of a McLaren walkover. But it isn't. We've got a really fascinating dynamic between the two McLaren drivers. You've got a Max Verstappen that will constantly prove a thorn in whoever's side is leading the race. And the other big factor is that it is the final year of these regulations. At what point do the top teams who are still in the chance for wins and the championship in the driver's side start to fully focus on next year? Already have some teams, Aston Martin have a small team that are looking at the 2025 car now. Williams have said they're not really focusing any big upgrades for the rest of this year. It's all focused on 2026. McLaren and Red Bull, they've got more resources. Yes, they've got more manpower within the team. Yes, more people doing it. But at what point do they start to then drift away from really focusing on this year and building up for 2026 and nailing that? Because if it's anything like we've seen beforehand, when we have a regulation like this that relates to the power units, you think back to 2014, there will be one team that rises to the top and absolutely nails it. And if the rumours are to be believed, Red Bull seem to be on the back foot and struggling. Mercedes seem to be the ones to beat. McLaren are the customer team. That could be a massive factor into how much Red Bull keep themselves in the frame going towards the end of this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's consider Ferrari before we take a short break. Should we? You touched on it at the top there, Ted. I mean, they've got a car that just can't handle the bumps and the curbs. They struggled in qualifying, very much a weekend of two halves. And they've got this mechanical issue, the rear suspension, which we understand they're going to bring a fix for to Silverstone or around about the middle of the season. By then, will it be too little, too late? And what did you make of Lewis's optimism? Because, as you said, strategically, really worked out for him. Very comfortable. Praised Riccardo Adami and the clarity of the messaging that he was getting in the cockpit in his Ferrari in Imola. Is he right to be positive after what we saw that weekend?
Yeah, I think it's better. And when I went to interview Fred Vasseur after the race, our colleagues from Channel 4 were ahead of us, so they got there first. So David Coulthard and Steve Jones were talking to Fred Vasseur, and afterwards, DC and Fred Vasseur were having a conversation. DC's back was to me, so he didn't know I was there. So they were having this nice conversation about, how DC can see Lewis really gaining confidence in there, and it's taken him a few races, but he recognises that, I was kind of listening in. It's like, oh, that's interesting. DC thinks that Lewis is actually getting there. And then Sylvia, the Ferrari press officer, very nicely said to David Coulthard, who she'd known for a very long time, sorry, they're waiting behind you. And DC turns around. It's like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were waiting. So, it's all right, DC's just listening in, quite interesting. But then I said to Fred Vasseur, look, 1.4 seconds off a podium, you were. It's like, and just imagine what you can do if you're not out in Q2. And he sort of laughed in the way he did and then gave me a kind of, yes, all right, don't have to rub it home. I know that. I know margins are tight, but Ferrari, you can't be going out in Q2, whatever the conditions, when your car is actually very good on race pace. And we knew it was very good. They knew it was very good on race pace after Friday. So it was a good one. The bigger question is maybe why did they pit Leclerc in the please don't, the curse of the early pitters, and got it just right with Lewis, and then again on the safety car to make sure he wasn't out of tyres. But they'd run out of tyres for Leclerc. They didn't really have anything for him to put on. So poor Charles. Lewis had a good race. And, you never know in Ferrari, do you? Will it be the sort of Leclerc homecoming again in Monaco? If they can get it somewhere near right, then it could be it could be a repeat of last year. It's probably unlikely, isn't it, Simon, to be a repeat?
It's unlikely because their weaknesses is, again, it's the slow corners, isn't it? So I think actually when you look last year, that was one of their relative strengths, and it's flipped round for this year. And yeah, I think it's unlikely that we'll see him plunging into the Marina this year again. Harry?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough weekend in Monaco for Ferrari. I think I'll just coming back to the dynamic between the two. Hamilton will be. I think I agree with what DC was saying. I think he will be buoyed by that and optimistic and take that forward. I think Hamilton is happier, especially after Miami. I think actually where we had all those amazing bits of team radio, and you think he'd be absolutely fuming after the race, but he wasn't. He was actually fairly chipper, or at least that's what he alluded. And I think he's just quite happy the fact he seems to be closing that gap and on par with Charles Leclerc in terms of outright pace in that Ferrari. The next problem will be, well, now they need to make that car back to a podium and a race-winning challenger. So I think that's where Hamilton is taking his confidence from at the moment. Charles Leclerc seems incredibly despondent on the complete opposite side of the spectrum compared to Lewis Hamilton. So I think bringing that kind of energy is not going to help Charles Leclerc at his home weekend either for Monaco. But it's just a bit erratic from Ferrari in terms of the car they've brought this year. They think they'd be able to, as you say, Simon, they were good in slow speed last year, and a twist of fate, and it's changed up again, and they're trying to maybe pin a little bit on this technical directive change for the flexi wings in Spain, but come on, it's not what Ferrari should really be doing, is it? They should have been at the end of last year. They were in with a shot of the Constructors' Championship with McLaren. They were theoretically the second best team at the end of last year. They should have flown out the blocks at the beginning of this season, like McLaren did. McLaren did and made a step up. Where were Ferrari? What happened?
Pressure's ramping up, isn't it? Pressure's ramping up on Fred and all of those at the top level. You can't be Ferrari and have these struggles for this amount of time. Well, you know, without there being repercussions, there usually are. But I think the belief in Fred Vasseur is there that and he's got the track record that he'll stay in place for a long time to come. But going back to what happened on track and Leclerc forcing to give up track position and that fifth place to Williams and Alex Albon, where he kind of squeezed him at the first chicane. Albon had fresher tyres around the outside, okay, and the left-hander. And then he said, so Leclerc comes onto the radio and he goes, is this what racing is now? When he can't pass, I need to let him pass. This is an effing joke. What did I do wrong? So it goes back to the guidelines, really. And overtaking the outside, your front axle's got to be ahead of the other car on the inside's front axle at the apex. If you're doing on the inside, the front axle at least alongside the mirror of the other car prior to and at the apex. Is it becoming, it's like micromanaging driving at the moment. I think this is the issue that they all have. And yet they're there helping to write the driver standard guidelines. So what do we do about this? Because it's every single week we're having issues on this front, Ted.
I think it's a result. It's just a consequence. You're gonna have it. It's better to have the driving standards in there and the guidelines in there. I think Ferrari could tell that if they let him through, they'd only drop one place to sixth. And actually, anyway, they were sure that Albon was going to get them anyway on the fresher tyres. So they thought, we're going to be sixth anyway. Let's just let him through and avoid being 11th or 12th. So I think that was I think that was the right call from Ferrari. Frustrated, although Leclerc might have been with the radio. But yeah, these old guidelines, you know, that many fans don't like them. But then what are you going to do? You need to have something where you're going to have a penalty, unless you just say, well, open season. But then you're letting people, you know, take the Michael, aren't you? But yeah, I don't know. I think the way they are at the moment, it's essentially the right call, and I didn't feel that Leclerc was, you know, robbed unduly of that place. I think it was a wise thing to give it back, and certainly Williams said that it was on the limit. They would have liked to have seen it tested before the stewards, but they were happy they got the place anyway.
I was going to suggest maybe could we pitch to the FIA, we get rid of driver guidelines for races where there is a natural punisher, the gravel, the grass at old school racetracks that it's waiting for you. and only have them for the races where, we are seeing more and more than where there is huge amounts of runoff and you can push somebody to the edge of the track, the Miamis, the Saudi Arabias. But then I suppose it was Albon who was the one forced off into the gravel. So yeah, I'm with Ted in terms of it's not the best thing you want to see, especially I'm pleased that Albon was able to kind of skirt through the gravel and keep his foot in it and not, spin off into the wall and have anything worse happen, because he was so due a good result for this weekend. But I think this is almost the best compromise that I think we can come up with at the moment. And at the moment, it's kind of working.
Yeah. All right. Okay, we're going to take a short break. I'm conscious of time. Ted's got to go and see a scaffolder in the next 20 minutes. So we'll take that break and then we will be back with the F1 show in a few moments' time. Quick word on our show partner, Audi. The philosophy of Audi Sport isn't just about winning races. It's about pushing boundaries. Everything learnt on the track goes straight into Audi's road cars, making them just as thrilling as they are refined. Take the Audi RS range, serious performance, but with a level of sophistication and refinement that doesn't need to be loud to make a statement. It's that perfect blend of power and precision wrapped in quiet luxury. Whether it's their powerful style or the RS sports suspension with Quattro all-wheel drive for razor-sharp handling, Audi is constantly redefining the future of performance. Book a test drive today to experience the Audi RS range for yourself. Welcome back to the F1 show, sponsored by Audi, as you probably heard there with the advert for Audi. Let's pick things up with Mercedes, and a disappointing weekend for them, to say the least. George Russell qualified in third, finished in seventh, no grip, massive complaints, and going backwards. Thought he had a problem with the car, actually, and Kimi Antonelli retired because of a throttle issue. When it's hot, we are nowhere, was George's comments. When it's cold, we can be fast. Simona Resta, the deputy technical director, saying, we've had no improvement with tyre management this year. It's clearly a thermal issue that they've got going on with their tyres, Harry, and it just didn't play out for them in Imola. Why was that?
Well, this is why I was a bit confused initially to hear those comments from George, because he's had a stunning start to the year. They've been top 5 pretty much every single race up until now. And we've had, Miami was blisteringly hot too. So I was a bit surprised to see George sort of say this was all down to tyres. But clearly they've not made the step forward that they wish they had on tyre management. And George was boxed in at the start, could have been up in second place if things had planned out differently and maybe used the track advantage to hold on to that. But ultimately they didn't have the pace. And I think that at the moment, Mercedes seem to be relying on Russell's consistency on the podium, which didn't happen, and Kimi Antonelli's promise. Antonelli with a very under the radar weekend for being on home soil. It didn't pan out for him at all, and it just seemed like they couldn't get to grips with so this weekend, Pirelli obviously bought the softer compounder tyre and the C6 soft, and I actually think that's a great call from them, because it kind of caused chaos, because nobody really knew what was going on throughout Friday and into Saturday at a track where we've seen degradation as a whole play a factor, rather than, if we come back to our McLaren chat earlier on, where it was all, when it's a rear limited track, they perform better because they can keep their rear tyres in shape. This was just a track where we saw general degradation, and it didn't work out for them. Simple as that.
I mean, it's really weird, Simon, when you haven't got instead of Toto Wolff being there. Toto, of course, was not there because he was at in the US in LA at the graduation of his oldest son. But instead, you have Ola Kalenius there, the head of Daimler-Benz, and you the biggest of biggest cheeses, and you're kind of let's hope that we have a good race, and the home hero. Out, and then George nowhere with the curse of the early stoppers. It's kind of it's kind of Homer Simpson into a bush, isn't it? It's like let's hope the guy who signs all of the checks doesn't notice that we still haven't got a handle on these cars. And early promise not delivered at Imola. So listen, we'll see. They need a good weekend in Monaco. Let's just leave it at that and hope that Ola Kalenius just was easily explained away as a little blip, and they'll be back on the podium soon.
Yeah, Kimi's class. He was nowhere on Saturday, but Kimi Antonelli, his mates turning up for work experience day at Mercedes Formula One team. That was a nice moment. That, and they look. I mean, this is the thing. I remember when Max came into the sport. How old was he? 16? Was it 17 when he first
17.
turned up? And he was to the manner born, wasn't he? He was straight in. I'm a racer. Kimi, you still feel like he's holding on to the last vestiges of his childhood, whilst at the same time doubling up, driving for one of the biggest teams in Formula One. It's an incredible story, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you've seen The Seat yet, the documentary, but he's still a child, and it's wonderful to see. He's still kind of full of the joys of spring, isn't he, Harry?
Well, he is. That's the way Formula One is going, though. The drivers are getting younger and younger by the year. I wonder, though, if it was a bit too much for him this weekend. I think he did even come out with comments after the race saying he didn't feel like he was fully involved, fully prepared. It was perhaps a bit of a setup issue in qualifying hindered his progress in that respect. But I think it was more down to the fact that there was so much buzz around Kimi this weekend, from his classmates turning up on the Thursday to the huge contingent of fans there. I wonder if it was just becoming a little bit too difficult to block out the noise for him on that front. And as such a young kid, that's so hard to deal with. You've got to, not only have you got to drive a Formula One car, but you've got to deal with literally being in his backyard. He's the boy from Bologna, 40 kilometers east, I think Bologna is from Imola. So I think that maybe just proved a little bit tricky. I think we saw at Toto giving him a bit of a pep talk in the build-up to this weekend as well on video call, just kind of reminding him to stay calm, don't let it all go to your head, just focus on each day, focus on the sessions, and I think that's still something that he's got to work on and deliver. He's got so much promised. Miami showed it. The raw speed is absolutely there, but he just needs to put together a full weekend now.
I don't know. I'd be a bit more generous to Kimi, actually. I mean, first thing, I spent a day with him on Monday doing a feature for a later race, one of the Spain probably. And what I learned there, what he said is that, look, he's a hugger. Basically, so it's not like Max Verstappen when he came in at the same age. Kimi is a hugger. He'll hug everybody. He'll hug you after a good result. He'll hug his parents. Hug his sister. He's a affectionate hugging guy. But that's just the way he is, and he's incredibly quick. So it's not his fault the car broke down. Yes, all right. You could argue it wasn't. The qualifying was his fault, but the car was clearly nowhere this weekend. So I really don't think you can blame him. And because he's a hugger, because he's a nice guy, he wanted to show his friends a nice time. And do you know what? If I was an 18-year-old and Mercedes gave me the pass, I think I would have probably brought my friends in on a Thursday. It's only the Thursday. It's not, it's not affecting the rest of the weekend. He was there late on Friday evening. He was there early on Saturday and late on Saturday. I didn't see him one of the early leavers like some other drivers in the paddock. So yeah, he was absolutely still on the game. It's just that his and heaven knows he wanted to have a good weekend in Imola of all places, just near to where he was born and now where he lives. And so it was just the car, and it wasn't a great weekend. But I don't think he lost focus, because he's absolutely on it with the focus things. But yes, if you have seen that documentary, The Seat, it is very good for basically a sponsor's documentary. Now, I hope Netflix didn't pay too much of it, the amount of product placement that's in it. But there are a couple of very nice pieces in there, which is when he runs over one of his mechanics with a spinning wheel in the practice pit stop in the testing of previous cars. And then that relationship that he's built with that mechanic is very sweet. And then when he sees that mechanic later on in the factory, and it's kind of, hello, Kimi, you ran over me. Yeah, we're all love you. That's a very, very touching moment in that documentary. So yeah, I would recommend it.
I love him. I love the rawness. I love everything about Kimi at the moment. He just brings a smile to your face whenever he hits the track. Talking of product placement, by the way, Harry, have you been aware of George Russell and his vlogging of power tools?
I think, yes. I've seen him trim some hedges.
Yeah. I've been following this. We talked about this on the pod the other week. I'm a big fan of this activation. if you look on their Instagram page in the UK now, every single race they're doing an offer. So you can get some Mercedes merch, but at the Imola race, you could get a professional cordless grass trimmer. Okay, you're having a look now, aren't you? And the one before, you could get professional cordless chainsaw plus some Mercedes merch. Now, I noticed though, in the latest one, where George is again in his chateau cutting the grass in his chinos and crisp white shirt, they've got a hashtag Road to Silverstone. Something big is coming, and then it looks like if you go onto that website, you might be able to get a VIP experience and every single one of these cordless power tools. So I, for one, am in because it is growing season in my garden. And I'm thinking, I've got blue tits in my bird box. I need to trim the hedges around that. This is the activation for me. So
it's slightly ruined by the health and safety first bit, where George Russell has to make a massive thing about putting his safety goggles on. Do you wear safety goggles, Simon, when you're mowing the lawn?
Yeah, and
no, you don't.
Safety shoes,
Right?
Especially with a strimmer, you could take a toe off. Yeah, sorry about that, Harry. Welcome to the pod. Sometimes we like to get into gardening tips. Should we finish with some other positives from Imola and look ahead to Monaco? Williams. Lots of positives. I said kind of winner of the weekend was Alex Albon. And yet they were disappointed with finishing where they did. Sainz was probably quicker than Alex Albon on the evidence of the weekend, but he got caught out with a poor strategy call and a bit of bad luck. But this is consistent. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, whatever's going on at Grove, and this is Jimmy V instigated, plus all of the hires that he's making, they're beginning to see a difference there, aren't we? For the first time. In fact, it was their best points haul since Azerbaijan in 2017. Says it all, really, Harry.
It does. I think there was more on the table, both in qualifying and the race. I think Sainz, we come to him first, as you say, was looking like the quicker of the two throughout the weekend. He went P1 at the end of Q2. But his lap wasn't he couldn't match the lap time in Q3, couldn't quite get the tyre warm up and get the use of a toe in his final run. So he could have been higher up in qualifying. So there was more left wanting on the table there. I think a podium could have been on the cards. I think for Alex Albon, if the way the strategy was panning out with the safety car and the virtual safety car, which scuppered so many of the grid's strategy, I have to say this is mightily impressive from Williams. I don't think we were all, I think, we were all hoping for progress, weren't we? Because been at the back for so long now. James Vowles coming in and reorchestrating how that team operates, whether that's within the cost cap and as well the cap in terms of the modernisation of their facilities at Grove as well is something that he has fought for quite a lot since he came into the role, and they are behind the curve when it comes to their facilities too. So that's clearly improving, along with the hirings within their team. And for the first time in a long time, they have two capable drivers who can extract the maximum from what they are given. Carlos Sainz is still developing within this team, still finding his feet, but he's there or thereabouts now, and he just needs that strategy to go a bit better for him in Imola, and he would have been right up there too. So I have no doubt about that. I think it bodes so nicely to see how this team transforms into 2026, which is what they were all working for anyway. So it just seems it's come perhaps a little bit earlier than they thought. They want to get back to challenging for wins and titles like the good old days. But right now, Albon and Sainz, Williams, flying high.
Is there going to be a point, Simon, where Carlos Sainz starts to get miffed with Alex scoring all the big points?
If he's not already miffed. I mean, he was unlucky this week, wasn't he? I think his time is coming. He's been there. The pace has been there for the last few weekends. But lest we forget, Ted, that this time last year, they left Imola still scratching around for their first point. And now look at where they are. And it's regular. And as I mentioned, 6 of the last 7 top 10s for Alex. He's quality. We've always known that. There's a reason why Lando Norris had a poster of him on his wall when he was a youngster. They recognised the talent that he had. That's been seen. And to be ahead of Carlos Sainz, who is quite rightly perceived as one of the top 5 drivers on the grid, I think is tantamount to his skill. And I think this is arguably the second best lineup on the grid in terms of drivers.
I thought Williams were going to get a podium actually in Imola. I thought they had a good chance. I thought if Albon, I think I said in commentary, Albon can be the top man of defence, minister of defence, to coin a phrase, and maybe stay there. He was overtaken quite quickly by Oscar, and then Lewis was already ahead of him. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible Williams could get a podium. I think if it can be Sainz, then that would go a long way to kind of cooling his nerves about how the team operationally, Sainz feels, and Sainz talks about this on Thursday. Operationally, the team isn't as sharp as it needs to be, and in the ways that Sainz has seen at Ferrari in the past. And so I asked Alex Albon about this, and he said, "Yeah, I agree. We're not as good operationally as perhaps a top team that we need to be, but that'll come."
Let's finish, if we could, with Aston Martin. First impactful upgrade, perhaps in a couple of years, but starting 5th and 8th, and then both cars out of the points again. What augured so well on Saturday, Harry, fell apart on Sunday.
Didn't it just? I mean, I was suspecting we might get an Alonso classic DRS train throughout Imola, and he'd hold on to a point score that way. Unluckiest driver in Formula One, unluckiest in the world. You have to feel for him a little bit on that front. The safety car, the VSC, really putting pay to any kind of chance to score points for Alonso in Imola. I think they can still take some sort of satisfaction, though, because I think together with the upgrade, which I don't think the upgrade brought massive amounts in terms of seconds of lap time, but it certainly brought momentum to the team and some optimism. I think they are in a better place than they have been, and this is the first upgrade I think we've seen from Aston Martin in a long time that has actually made any kind of impact. That, together with the softer compound of tyres that Pirelli brought this week, I think that's what helped them out. But I mean, if you're Fernando Alonso, where you've now gone well over half your career as winless in Formula One, I don't know how he stays motivated. I think he's surely looking at 2026 and just desperately trying to make his way there, because it's going to be a pivotal year for the team.
I think it was a fun fight. I mean, he finished, even though, he said it was going to be torture. I think something in Alonso might have thought, well, I might be able, despite all of this bad luck and this torture, get a point. And he was so almost there. He was 0.8 of a second off Yuki Tsunoda. And I think that's the 3rd or 4th time he's finished 11th, isn't it, Harry? And he hasn't scored a point yet, Fernando. But yeah, I mean, he started the season, Simon, saying that he was going to start the season quieter, so to be stronger at the end. And I don't know, I can just see a race where he finishes 4th or 5th, and it might even be in Monaco. Because what impressed me about Aston is that they turned up in qualifying. They had a plan with the medium tyre that nobody else did, and they delivered. And when you can still be that sharp as a racing team, pick yourself up when you get kicked in the
those things
stops tummy on Sunday, and then pick yourselves up and go home and come to Monaco, then more points for Lance and first points for Fernando, surely not too far away.
Yeah, and Adrian Newey, we understand, will be on the pit wall for the first time in Aston Martin colours at the Principality. So there we are. We were assured that he wasn't looking at all at the 2025 car. He's solely focused on 2026. Maybe that remains, but I should imagine he's got plenty of sponsors' duties as well. Work in dispatches for Isaac Hadjar, who picked up a point. Again, his speed is excellent, and you'd think with the way things are going out at Red Bull that obviously he's the next in line if he keeps this up. Who knows what might be around the corner on that front. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Ted. Ted's got to go and sort out his scaffolders now. But yeah, appreciate you coming on the pod, Harry. We'll see you out there, albeit in another guise. Ted, word on Monaco, all about Saturday. What's going to happen?
Yeah, we should. Monaco's going to be good. No one knows how this two-stop thing is going to go. I'll do an explaining it as much as I can with how we think it's going to work, whether it's going to be one of those terrible ideas that Formula One has an opportunity to come up with sometimes. But a final word, if I could, for Imola, Simon. If this is the end, if this is goodbye, then thank you, Imola. Arrivederci, a place tinged with tragedy, with the loss of Senna and Ratzenberger, maybe outgrown Formula One with the big accidents we saw with Yuki and Colapinto, slightly chillingly at Tamburello. As well for Colapinto. But, what a place with soul, with history. But lovely in the May sunshine. And we'll miss it. We'll really miss it.
Absolutely. I'll echo those thoughts as well. Well done, Harry. Pleasure having you on, as I mentioned. And we will see you in the Principal. I hate calling it that. We'll just see you in Monaco, right? Which is Monte Carlo. And we'll see you later on this weekend. From us all here, Toodle Pip.